Hello and welcome to the Race Asylum YouTube channel. So this time we've got a guide for the team tourers. So this week at Red Bull Ring. So we'll be showing you the best lines and the best overtaking places. So hopefully it helps you out. So as you can see then, this week we're at Red Bull Ring. So we'll start off with the short version of the track again. And we're doing our guide this week in the Aston Martin. So obviously keep that in mind depending what car you're in. You might have to adjust your braking points slightly. So we'll just start off with turn one. Now I like to go up on this curb, so you're obviously opening up the corner as much as you can. And the first braking marker I'm looking for is this 100-meter board, or the marshals, or the white line coming across the track. You can brake later than it, probably about here maybe. And if you've got a really good car on the brakes, maybe even later. Just keep in mind that the later you brake, the more chance you have of running wide and getting a penalty. And obviously I want to be coming off the curb as you see these black tyre marks coming off. Bringing the car around, and you want to just clip this apex and then back on the power, but just making sure you don't run any wider than 2 tyres over this yellow sausage curb. I think you can, if you get 2 tyres off, I don't even think it's over the sausage, I think it's if you get 2 tyres off the red and white curb, then that's a penalty. So just make sure if you go across that you keep 2 of those tyres on that red and white curb to make sure you don't get a penalty. Because penalties at this track are one thing you really don't want to pick up, and they're very, very easy to pick up. So our next brake marker now then is these marshals on the left and the cameraman, or this advertising board going across the track in front of you. And again, you want to get as close to it as you can before you brake. But if you're getting to it before braking, you probably, unless you've got a really good car on the brakes, you're probably braking way too late. So just make sure you're braking before this board, because again, better to brake a little bit early and have to lift off the brakes and be able to hook the inside here anyway. So as I said, you want to brake, you want to turn the car in, and you want to hook this white line. You really want to get in, and I like to just hug it round and keep it nice and tight. You can come in a little bit later and come tight later, but it's very easy to run deep if you do that. So that's why I like to just keep it tight from the start of the corner and just feather the throttle as the car comes round. And then as you get to the end of this curb, you should be able to get back on the power and across to the left. But just remember, you might have to feather the throttle a little bit here, and as you touch that curb, you then should be able to be back on full power out to the outside of the track, and then obviously you're off through to the next corner. So very much about throttle control through that section of the track. So then coming up to the penultimate corner now then, I like to get up on the curb again like we did at turn 1, and we're looking for them marshals on the left. Again, very similar to turn 1, you're better off braking a little bit early here than braking too late, because you will run deep and you will pick up a penalty for running off the track. So keep that in mind. As I said, I like to brake at those marshals and carry on, come off the curb a bit earlier than at turn 1, and just try and clip the inside of this apex. And as you clip this curb, you should be able to get back on the power and not worry about running wide, because again, what you need to do is keep 2 tyres, so keep your right hand 2 tyres on this red and white curb. If your right hand 2 tyres get off that red and white curb, then you've gone too deep into the corner and you're going to pick up a penalty. So just bear that in mind, because again, you don't want to be picking up penalties here. So our final braking zone then is the end of the Austrian flag on the left, or where it turns grey, or these first 2 yellow sausages. Again, depending on car, how late you can brake, but again, same as every other corner. At this track, you're much better braking a little bit earlier and just having to ease off the brakes into the corner than you are braking late, so just bear that in mind. And then we get to the end of the curb, we want to be coming off just before the end of the curb, just clipping that apex. As you see, the apex just cambers in a little bit, so it'll help rotate the car, and just as you clip that apex, you should be able to be back on the power. The car will wash out to the left, but again, just make sure you don't wash out over. Keep 2 tyres, at least keep your right hand 2 tyres on this red and white curb, or you will get an off track. So just bear that in mind. So we'll just go through that a little bit faster now then. As I said, just as we're coming up into turn 1, we're looking to get onto the curb and we're looking for the marshals or the 100-metre board. So there we go, braking at the marshals, bringing it down, coming off the curb, just clipping that apex and back on the power and not running too wide. So then we're looking for this advertising board ahead of us, braking just before it, getting the car turned in, try and keep it tight, follow that curb round and then back on the power and then feather the throttle just a little bit to get into that curb and then back on the power again so we don't run wide. And then now we're looking to get up on that curb again. Up on the curb, brake at the marshals, get the car turned into that apex, back on the power, not running wide. Looking for them yellow sausages, same again, into that apex and back on the power without running wide. So we'll just go around again. So turn 1, obviously looking to get up on the curb and looking for that 100-metre board. Braking at the 100-metre board, getting turned off that curb, onto the apex, back on the power. Make sure we don't run too wide. And then coming through, looking for the advertising board and braking just before it, getting the car turned in. Trying to hug that apex, that curb as best we can. Back on the power now then. Feather the throttle if need be and then back on the power when you can see you're not going to run wide. And then obviously again we're pulled to penultimate corner now then. We're looking to get up on that curb and looking for the marshals. There's the marshals, braking, bringing it into that apex, back on the power. And then looking for that sausage curb, braking into that apex, back on the power as early as we can, but being careful not to run wide. So then we'll just do one more now then. So we'll 100-metre board or the marshals, onto the brakes, bring the car in, turned into that apex, back on the power as early as we can. And then looking for that advertising board, braking just before it. Gone a little bit deep that time, get back into that apex though, just hold it tight, get back on the power, feather the throttle if need be, back on the power again when you know you're not going to run wide. And then now we're looking to get back up on the curb again when the curb starts and looking for those marshals. So up onto the curb, we see the marshals, brake at the marshals, get the car turned in, as you get to that apex, back on the power, to them yellow sausages, again, into that apex, back on the power. We just slid right wide there, so just be careful if you do that. Just delay getting on the power a little bit. And that's a lap of the short version of the track. So we'll just go through some overtaking areas now then on this track. The most moves are probably going to be done into turn 1 here, but just something to keep in mind, actually most moves will be done at the penalty zone. So be aware, don't pick up penalties in the race and you'll be at a huge advantage because people are going to be picking up penalties at this track. So just bear that in mind. So coming into turn 1, you're going to want the inside if you're attacking. So you're going to want to get to the inside if you're attacking, but don't narrow this corner too much. When they're alongside you, if they're to the outside, make sure you get as close to them as you can, but giving them space to obviously open this corner as wide as possible. And if you are on the outside, I would advise letting the inside car have it, brake a little early, concentrate on your exit, let them come past you. They might run wide and pick up a penalty, but also that they might have to take the apex a bit slower. So as they come past you, you can get on the power a bit earlier and you might get the inside line up into turn 2. So just bear that in mind. But obviously, for going for the move here, the inside is where you're going to do it. And obviously, you're going to wash out wide naturally anyway at this corner. So I wouldn't try and hold it round the outside of that corner because the other person's not going to try and run you off. They're just naturally going to run you off. So just be aware of that if you are on the outside going into turn 1. And then the second place is turn 2. If you've got the run out of turn 1 and you've got the inside, same as turn 1, you always want the inside at this track. Then obviously you're going to have to brake a little bit earlier, but obviously you can then hug this inside line. So again, if you need to, defend into this corner, and if you're attacking, try and get on the inside because the inside will really benefit you here. So just bear that in mind because, as I said, when you're on the inside line, brake that little bit earlier and just keep this car tucked in. The car on the outside is going to have to go all the way around the outside of you, which is going to be very, very difficult for them to do. And when you get to about here in the corner, you're probably ahead of them, either still ahead of them if you're defending, or you've probably passed them by now if you're attacking. So the car on the outside is really going to struggle to hold it round the outside because they've got no camber in this corner to really help them. So always try and get the inside line into this corner if you can. And then if you are too wide here, personally, filter back in. You'll have to run down into the penultimate corner probably anyway. So just bear that in mind because you're going to struggle to go too wide through here. You're obviously risking getting run off the track. So then again into the penultimate corner, people are going to serve penalties. So that's actually a really good place to overtake, is people serving penalties. But again, into this penultimate corner, personally, I would maybe show for the move, but I wouldn't necessarily go for a move. Because if you're on the inside line, you're going to wash wide. You're going to risk washing the car on the outside wide as well. So again, I wouldn't try and stick it on the outside of this corner. If someone goes for the move and gets the inside, back off a little early, tuck back in behind them. They might run wide and pick up a penalty, or they might run wide and have to lift off to not pick up a penalty, which might give you the inside into the final corner, or it might give you the better run all the way down into turn one again. So just beware when doing this. But obviously, if you are on the outside, as I said, I'd let the car come past, just brake that little bit earlier, maybe delay your turning and turn in a little bit later. Get on the power just before the apex then if you've turned in a little bit later, and they will wash out to the left, and hopefully you can get this inside line into the final corner. But again, unless you're fully alongside, I wouldn't go for the move into the final corner either, because it's a very difficult corner to go round side by side. So again, if you're on the outside and someone has got the inside, just brake early, hold the car straighter longer, let them come through, cut back and get on the power just before the apex, because of apexing a little bit later into the corner. Get on the power earlier, and hopefully you'll have got on the inside of them before they can come across and cover the inside, so you'll have the inside line into turn one. So obviously you've got to be very tactical here and think ahead of how you're going to make moves. Keep in mind, don't get penalties, because that's a good way to make up positions, is by not getting penalties. And always think a corner ahead. Don't necessarily go for the move into the corner you're coming up to. Try and set the move up for the next corner by putting the other car offline. That's probably your best way to go for the move here. But you can pretty much overtake at most places at this track, which does make it exciting. But you can pick up penalties at pretty much most corners at this track as well. So just bear that in mind. So we'll move on to the full length version now then. So we'll just look at the long version of the track now then. So obviously we're on the medium tyres this time, and the tyre wear and fuel is down as the same. So we're looking for that 100 metre board, the same as we said before, the white line across, the marshals, whichever you prefer to look out for turn one. Getting onto the brakes, and obviously you can brake a bit later, but make sure you don't run too wide. And then you see all these black lines just before the end of the curb we want to turn in. Just clip this apex and then back on the power as soon as we can, being sure, like we said on the short version, not to run wide here. Keep 2 tyres on that red and white curb if you can, and then you know you're safe. But then this time, obviously we're powering out and we're going past this advertising board all the way to the end of the track for what we'll call turn 2 for simplicity reasons. So again, when we come up here, we're looking for the 100 metre board again. Couple of ways you can do this. You can stay fully on the tarmac, makes your braking a bit better. You can go up onto the curb, make the corner a bit wider, or you can, as you see with the tyre marks, slightly angle towards the outside of the corner, so you brake to start with on the tarmac and then up onto the curb and then bring it to the right. So just practice around with them and see what you think. But 100 metre board again, you want to be braking, and the same again just before the end of this curb, you'll see the black tyre marks coming in. So just before the end of the curb, we want to start to turn in. We just want to dip our wheels into this apex just where the curb is. Just clip that, let the car rotate, and as soon as you can see that the car's rotating and he's not going to run wide, get back on that power. In group 4, you should be alright, but some cars may struggle, so just be aware you might want to upshift early there to make sure you don't lose the back end, because you don't want to be crashing at that corner, because it is easy to do. So just be aware of that when you're doing the race. So then now as we come down into turn 3, we're obviously looking for the 100 meter board again, and here personally I prefer to brake not on the curb, just to make your braking efficiency a bit better because of the fact you're braking downhill anyway. So we're braking about the 100 meter board, but depending whether you choose to brake on the curb or off the curb might depend on how close you can get to that 100 meter board. So that's just a bit of practice to decide that. But again, we want to be coming down, keep the car straight as we're braking, and then just as we get before the end of this curb, we want to just be turning in, clipping into this apex here, letting the car rotate, and once we see the car's rotated back on the power, the car will wash wide, and then you want to bring it back to the right hand side of the track. And then this time we're looking for the 50 meter board, not the 100. I like to get up onto the curb here, and we're looking for the 50 meter board, brake at the 50, and then we're turning in just before the end of this curb, and we want the car to just come round, come round, come round. You can use all these tyre marks to help, and then we just want to apex in the middle, keep it tucked in a little bit, and then back on the power as soon as you feel that you're not going to run wide, because it's very hard to judge. It just takes practice to figure out how early you can get back on the power out of that corner. And then again, same as the other corners, make sure you keep your two left-hand tyres on this red and white curb, or you will pick up a penalty. So next braking zone is the end of this curb where the short version of the track rejoins. So obviously you can see the point. You want to be braking, but not a full brake, just a slight tap of the brakes. And then we want to be bringing the car in towards this curb. And if we can just get 2 wheels just to clip this curb, then we should be able to get fully back on the power as soon as we clip that curb and not worry about running wide. So obviously, again, same as before, we don't want to run too wide onto that curb. So now we're coming into the final 2 corners. Same as we did, basically exactly the same as what we said for the short version of the track. Up onto this curb, looking for them marshals. Can brake a bit later, maybe brake earlier, depending on car. But just be aware, you're always better to brake earlier, like I've said a couple of times at this track, because you don't want to be running wide and picking up a penalty. So we want to brake, and just before we get to the end of this curb again, bringing the car in, just clipping this apex on the inside. And as soon as we clip that apex, we should be able to get back on the power and not run wide out of this corner. So obviously here, same as we said before, make sure you keep your 2 right-hand tyres on that red and white curb so you don't get a penalty. And again, we're looking for the end of that red and white, like Austrian flag, or where it turns to grey, or these 2 yellow sausage curbs, which are what I prefer to look at. They're a bit more noticeable. And then obviously we're braking down and obviously turning in just before the end of the curb, and we just want to clip this apex, help the camber of the corner bring us round, and then back on the power as soon as we clip that apex, and we should be able to not run wide. But again, just be very careful about running wide there, because you don't want to be picking up a penalty. So we'll just go through that a bit faster now then. So we've just been back in the pits there, so hopefully we've got nice warm tyres now. So we'll just show you a faster lap. And as you see, we've been joined by Gaz. So we're looking to get up on this curb, looking for the 100 meter board, onto the brakes, getting turned into that apex, back on the power as soon as we can, making sure we don't run too wide. And then now we're obviously powering out up to turn 2, where we're going to be looking for the 100 meter board again. So again, looking for that 100 meter board, onto the brakes, get the car turned in, just clip that apex, back on the power as soon as we can. And again, depending on your car, the situation, just be aware you might want to do an early upshift there, but I think Group 4 you should be alright. So now we're on the downhill, so we're looking for that 100, but we want to brake before it because of coming downhill. And then we want to get the car turned in onto this curb and then back on the power as soon as we can. Let the car drift wide and then bring it back to the right hand side of the track. And then we're looking to get up on this curb, looking for the 50 meter board, onto the brakes, bring the car round, tuck it in, and as soon as we know we can get on the power without running wide, back on the power, end of the curb, onto the brakes, just get the car turned in, up onto that curb, back on the power. But you see we had to lift not to run wide there, so we got on that power just a little bit early. So it's all down to just a bit of practice to figure out roughly where you can get back on the power. Looking for these marshals again, onto the brake, get it turned into that apex and back on the power. Sausage curbs onto the brakes, get it turned in and back onto the power at that apex without running wide. So we'll try and go through that a little bit faster now then if we can. So obviously up onto the curb, looking for that 100 meter board, onto the brakes, get it turned into that apex, back on the power as soon as we can without running wide. And then powering on through all the way up to turn 2, where again we'll be looking for the 100 meter board again. Keep your eye out, where's that 100 meter board, onto the brakes, bring it down, get the car turned in. We just missed that apex that time, so we had to delay, but you see there the snap we got, because of missing that apex on a slightly different line, the car snapped on us, so that's why I'm on about you might need an early upshift, so just be aware of that at that corner, especially during the race. So there, that 100 meter board just before it because of the downhill, into that curb, back on the power as soon as we can, but we're a bit early again on the power there. So I'll try and do one more lap after this to show it a bit better. So 50 meter board onto the brakes, get the car turned in, and then back on the power as soon as we know we're not going to run wide. End of the curb, just a dab of brakes again, back in, up onto that curb, and as soon as we're on, back on the power when we know we ain't going to run wide. So again now, penultimate corner, looking to get up onto the curb, looking for them marshals, onto the curb, braking at them marshals, getting the car into that apex, back on the power so we're not going to run wide, sausage curbs onto the brakes, into that apex, and back on the power without running wide. But you see we just clipped the sausage on the inside of that corner, so just be aware of that as well. So hopefully we can do a better lap this time round. So 100 meter board, onto the brakes, let the car turn in, back onto the power as soon as we can without running wide. And then powering out all the way down to turn 2, where we're going to be looking for that 100 meter board again. So looking for that 100 meter board, onto the brakes, get the car turned into that apex and onto the power as soon as we can, early upshift if needed. And then obviously powering out, and then now we're obviously onto the downhill braking zone, so looking for the 100 meter board, but we need to brake a little bit earlier just because of the downhill. And then we're trying to get the car turned into this curb, and then once we can see it's not going to run wide, onto the power and bring the car back over to the right hand side of the track. Very tricky corner to get right that. So up onto the curb, 50 meter board, onto the brakes, and then get the car turned in, and once we know we're not going to run wide, back on the power. End of the curb, same again, just a dab of brakes, get the car turned in and back onto the power as soon as we can when we know we ain't going to run wide. And then penultimate corner now, up onto the curb, looking for the marshals. So there we go, there's the marshals, onto the brakes, get the car turned into that apex and then back on the power as soon as we can. Sausage curbs, onto the brakes, get turned into that apex and back onto the power without running wide. And then obviously that's a lap of Red Bull, the full one. So we'll just go through some overtaking points now then. So obviously same as we said on the short version of the track, turn 1's going to be a place to go for the move, but just remember this time you have got the long run up to turn 2 as well. So obviously going for the move at turn 1, you might get repassed, so you might actually be better setting up at turn 1 and thinking about turn 2 because you got the long run. So just bear that in mind, like we said at the short version of the track. If you're on the inside, just be careful because it'll be easy to run wide and pick up a penalty. If you're on the outside, I personally would let them have it. Don't try and hang it round the outside at all. Let them have it and then cut back in a bit later. Get on the powered earlier if you can, and then obviously powered out through the corner, and hopefully then you can get the run on them and get the inside coming down into turn 2, which is obviously going to be your main place for going for the move. So obviously keep that in mind. Just as we see Gaz here messing around on the track. Where's he going? So again, coming up to turn 2, same thing. If you've got the inside, you're obviously the most likely to go for it. So if you get the inside of the track where Gaz is now, then obviously you're going to get the move done. So personally, if you're on the outside, I would let them have it, let them take the position, cut back in, see if you can get on the power a bit earlier than them, because again, you've got the run down to turn 3, which is another good spot to overtake, so just bear that in mind. But again, if you're on the outside, it's not worth fighting it. You're probably going to get forced off the track, or you're going to be on a really bad line. You're going to risk spinning the car. So again, I would wait and try and repass the move. They might get a penalty. You know, anything can happen. So just bear that in mind. As we've said before, this track, very much see if they get penalties. So obviously Gaz clearly here is helping us show you these areas. So again, coming down into this next corner now then. So see if Gaz keeps the inside. So again, here, 100%, if you're on the outside here, as Gaz hits me, if you're on the outside here, don't try and hold it. You can hold it round the outside here, but as we've seen in F1, if you try and hold the outside here, you're just going to get forced off the track. It's not going to be deliberate. People will try to give you space, but it's so easy to run a bit deep here and force you wide. So if you trust the person on the inside, definitely try and hold it on the outside. But if you don't, just let them have the move and try and cut back and get the run later on. They might get a penalty. You know, anything can happen. It's not worth ruining your race in one corner. So again, inside, you always want the inside. So if you're defending, defend the inside, because it's very hard to go around the outside. So just be aware of that during the race, but you can go around the outside. So obviously then, coming into this next corner, unless you've already got through that last corner side by side and you're still side by side, I would not go for the move into this corner, because it's very difficult to hold it side by side here. So obviously, as you come into this corner, go into single file, get back behind them, because if you're offline here, again, you just risk getting pushed wide. You can hold it on the outside, and if you do have to defend the inside, give them space on the outside. I guarantee you they will not hold it round the outside of this next left-hander. So obviously, coming here, as we come round to the left now then, if you're on the outside here, you've just got no chance. You'll start to wash out, and you're just going to risk crashing off. So do not even attempt to hold it round the outside of this corner. Just tuck back in behind them if someone is alongside you. Let them have it, tuck back in behind them, and go for the run into the penultimate corner. Go for the run into the final corner, and then into turn 1. It's not worth going for it there, losing loads of time, risking crashing when you could have an easier opportunity coming up anyway. So just bear that in mind. And again, penalty zone there. People are going to be serving penalties. To be honest, that's your best way to make up moves, even though there is a lot of overtaking moments on this track. So again, just as we come to this corner, obviously as we see Gaz in the braking zone. So same again, if you're on the inside line, you're going to have the move done, but just be careful, you are going to wash out wide. So if the car does try and hold it round the outside, just try and give them space. But if you're on the outside, don't even attempt it, in my opinion, because you're probably going to get forced off. You're not going to be happy. Yes, it's going to be the car on the inside's fault for forcing you off, but also that's just the way the track goes. So just be clever about it and be careful. So as you see now then, obviously you're going to be able to come through, and as you see Gaz, you might see, if you can come narrower, you might get the run into the final corner. And again, same thing as we said at the short version, if you're on the inside at the final corner, you've got the move done. Just be careful, because you're taking it a bit narrower. And if you're the car on the outside, don't even fight it, let them have it. They're going to be narrow, you're going to get the turning, you're probably going to get the better exit, and you've got a long run down to turn 1 where you're probably going to get the move done anyway. So just bear that in mind. So as we've said here, just be very tactical of where you're going to overtake. There is loads and loads of opportunities to overtake here, so there's no need to rush it. You know, it's not like that's your only chance you're going to get for the move. So just be clever about it and make the move where you know it's going to be possible, and think the corner ahead. So like I said, final corner, if they're on your inside, just let them have it and think about getting the run into turn 1. Turn 1, if they've got the inside line, let them have it, think about the run into turn 2, and so on. There's so many places to go for it here. Just be a bit smarter about it and plan where you're going to do your overtake. Hopefully this guide will help you practice for the next race. So let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.